Hey, peace, Black Power, Uhuru, to the family out there. Welcome to another episode of We Charge Colonialism Podcast and Book Club. I am Yukimba Ojore, host of We Charge Colonialism Podcast and Book Club, community organizer, educator, and here with my comrade.
Peace, everyone. This is Frank, host for the Revolutionary Repatriation Educational Lecture Series every Sunday.
Right on. Which you can always tap into on our channel. So make sure that you subscribe to We Charge Colonialism, the We Charge Colonialism channel, so you can tap into any podcast that we have had in the past, but also to get updates on when we are going live. We Charge Colonialism podcast is an opportunity for us to have conversations that you will not have in the mainstream media. Our conversations are around the liberation of African people, and it's to combat the colonial media that puts out a narrative that is just gotta okay. So our third party is going to be joining us in a minute, and this I'm glad she's joining us, Sister Natasha, because I want to start off the program with talking about one of our freedom fighters. We're talking about national liberation today, and now with nation building or bringing forth a new nation, there's going to be struggle, and it's going to take freedom fighters, right, to go up against the colonial empire. And one of those great freedom fighters was Sekou Odinga, who had transitioned yesterday. And, I just wanted to start off by saying rest in power to Sekou Odinga and long live Sekou Odinga, and wanted to appreciate his life, the work that he had put in, the sacrifices that he has made. This is a former political prisoner, someone who spent over 3 decades behind enemy lines. Well, we're all behind enemy lines, but this is someone who was incarcerated for over 3 decades for fighting for the freedom of African people. And fighting for the freedom of African people under colonialism is an illegal act. So, really quickly, I just want to help our sister get on. Frank, did you want to add on anything? I'm going to help her get on.
No, go ahead.
And really quick too, just I know you last week. Well, actually, no. Tomorrow you have an interesting podcast. You want to let people know what you're going to be doing tomorrow?
Yeah, sure. Tomorrow is going to be another hot topic to look into because last week or this week we should have had an event in Ghana called Pan Africans event, but holistically, it was called the New Africa Foundation. All right, and for some reason, it was canceled by Nana Akufo-Addo, the authority of Ghana, which of course I think it was a breach of contract because the venue was already given to this program to take place, and it was paid for already. And reason for which they canceled the event was never told. All right, but we have seen or heard lot of information on the internet which is not factual, which is not true. That's not what the Ghanaian authorities said. All right. So tomorrow we're going to be looking into it, examining it by pieces, and I'm going to let you know what I believe, what went on, and it will be the truth. That's what went on. That's why it was canceled. So we're going to be looking at it. All right, because that program should have carried a heavy weight. Imagine you having Dr. Arakina on a program, and you having Julia Malema on a program. All right, and you having Dr. Peter Lumumba on a program. Look, folks, don't take these things to be something joke. All right, that how people are trying to frame it on the internet that This guy was a political, he was politically ambitious. He had a different motive to become president of Ghana. Look, folks, if you read this man's statement, even if you look at his biography and things, there's nothing in there like that. So people are just coming out with their own narrative that, oh, he had a political ambition. And the thing here is, so what? Even if he had, so what? But the reality here is, most of these African leaders we have on the African continent, they are not ready for change. And it was because of that they canceled this program. Change is what they do not want. Like I said, imagine you having those power weight that the Arikina, all right? Julia Malema, Pierre Olumumba, all right? And lastly, Peter Obi. So what happened here was these African leaders do not want a change. Like, this program was going to spark a change. All we need on the African continent is the support of the people, the support of the youth. You saw what happened in Mali, in Burkina Faso. If that happened in Ghana, it's done. If that happened in Nigeria, it's done. Because Nigeria and Ghana in West Africa, they are the two nations right now, okay, holding the liberation of the African continent hostage. And we're going to be talking about that tomorrow.
Nah, appreciate that, man. So yeah, everybody make sure you tap into that. That's powerful discussion to be had. I think it exposes so many contradictions and how we have, even with among our own ranks, people who align themselves with the colonizers, right, and the colonizer agenda. So we have to be able to expose them and to uplift those people who are not falling in line, right? And again, going back to Baba Sekou Odinga, he was one of those people. And Sister Natasha, you want to introduce yourself, and also, I was beginning the program talking about Baba Sekou Odinga, who had transitioned. And I think among us all, you worked with him the most. I wanted to see if you wanted to share anything.
Peace, everyone. I'm Natasha. I work with the Northeast Political Prisoners Coalition, which is the organization that Sekou Odinga founded. And so, it's been a lot since, his transition yesterday, just, dealing with everything. And, yeah, just his legacy and the work that he's done, for his whole life in terms of, pursuing the liberation of African people, and African people's sovereignty, is like beyond what most people would be willing to do or could even imagine. We call him, and other political prisoners, superheroes, because the things that they've done, and to be able to work to end the oppression of African people is beyond heroic, beyond your average heroism. Like, he has helped so many comrades, from helping to release, to free Assata Shakur, to helping other political prisoners get out of prison, to helping within the movement even when he wasn't within the United States, through enduring torture on by the hands of the U.S. government. It's just, his praises can't be sung enough. And so, I've having the honor to work with him, and get to know him as a person, and as a father and a grandfather, has been like amazing, like something that is, you don't really have words for. So yeah, I think, just as we always work to lift his name up in the names of other political prisoners, it's important that we continue to do the same, in terms of in his honor, in his spirit.
Yeah, I agree. As you were speaking, I was thinking, like, we need a book on the life of Sekou Odinga, because this is a history that needs to be passed on to posterity, so that they, can know about liberation fighters such as Sekou Odinga. The work, actually, let me pull up. It's not much here, but I wanted to at least share just a short bio, if they allow me to do so. So this is Baba Sekou Odinga. Sekou Odinga was a member of Malcolm X's Organization of Afro-American Unity, a founding member of the New York chapter of the Black Panther Party, as well as and this is the Black Panther Party in New York, the Bronx, I believe, right?
I want to say I don't think it was the Bronx, because I know he's from Queens.
Harlem, maybe, right?
Yeah, it was. I believe it was the Harlem one.
Yeah. As well as the Black Panther International section, and was a member of the New York Panther 21, citizen of the Republic of New Africa, and combatant of the Black Liberation Army. Sekou was captured in October 1981, mercilessly tortured, and spent the following 33 years behind bars, a prisoner of war and political prisoner of the U.S. empire. Since his release in November 2014, he has remained a stalwart fighter for justice, or he was a stalwart fighter for justice and for the release of all political prisoners. Right. And like I said, like this, there needs to be a book that's written. And I hope he has done interviews, and there's people who knew Sekou Odinga since a child that are still around, and we need to gather these stories and I think compile them, because just speaking, when Sekou Odinga came home, he wasn't home maybe like 2 or 3 months, I don't think, and he went right to work. He got right back into the community. In 2014, we had a youth program in Brooklyn, Acarelli Leadership Program, and I remember him coming out to our program to talk to our youth, to like 40 youth. This is someone who just spent over 3 decades prison, is coming out and still passing, going to work, passing on the wisdom to the next generation. And I had the opportunity that time when he came home to sit down and speak with him. And it was crazy, because I'm thinking to myself, this is someone who almost did 4 decades in prison. He's taking his time out to speak with people that he don't know. He didn't know me from a can of spray paint, right? And so, me and another brother was able to sit at his feet and have a conversation with him, and he was sharing his stories of being a member of the Black Liberation Army and the struggle, being on the run from the beast, the police, but I think these are stories. But listening to him speak, it was very inspiring, and I think he symbolizes what we all should be in this struggle for liberation. Because to get to the point that he was at, you have to really be at a level of consciousness to understand that the system that we are a part of has to be dismantled. It's not a system that was designed for us. It's an imperialist system in its nature, and it's always going to be such. And what we are a part of now is sort of like a quote unquote like benign imperialism, because that's how it is. It's like the chains aren't on us, but they were able to set up a system where we actually participate. We willingly participate in this system, thinking that we have opportunities to like be the colonizer. Because that's at the end of the day, I guess we could speak to it. I'll speak to it more as we go later in the program. But I wanted to pass it on to you, Frank, for your story, and then we can go into the book reading.
Yeah, sure. And just to add to that, before I even get into my story, may Sekou Soul rest in peace. He's a revolutionary. He's still alive because we're gonna be talking about him a lot in different podcasts. Um, you see, this is why and encourage us, okay, to keep on going, because what he fought for, to be real, is still happening. What he fought for is exactly what we are fighting for. And it is only the oppressed who always fight for freedom, okay, are being more oppressed or put behind bars. You never see European fighting for what they call freedom and anybody put them behind bars. They never put themselves behind bars. Black people never put them behind bars. There's no area in the world that is controlled by Black people, okay, where white people or European went to fight for their liberation, their freedom, their equality, and they were put behind bars. There's no nation. If you see an European behind bars in any Black nation, that means that European either did corruption, money laundering, or kill someone, all right, or have some kind of heinous crimes that he was put behind bars, but not fighting for freedom, not fighting for his freedom, not fighting for his liberation, because there is no era. In fact, Europeans are not fighting for liberation. There is no nation in the world that is controlled by European that is honored oppressed. Who oppressed white nation or European nation? No one. So this is why we will not stop. We will continue. And just in reference to that, again, going to the event that was canceled in Ghana and the guy that organized the program, right? And I watched a platform, which of course I respect so dearly. But again, it was this same platform. Okay, I'm not going to mention the platform name, but when we had the Federation of African Liberation, and we decided at that time, we got in contact with them because they have million plus viewer, right? So we got in contact with them to use their platform to be able to give our message out there. And one thing they told us, and that's why we stopped, we did not use that platform. They said to us, you can use it, but you cannot talk against any African leader. That's what they told us. You cannot speak against any African leader, even if they are doing the wrong thing. Do not speak against them. And we never, and that alone made us not to use their platform. And this event I was just canceled in Ghana, I listened to them on their platform, the host, and he said the event that was canceled, it was not the authority of Ghana fault, it was not Nana Akufo-Addo fault, because Nana Akufo-Addo is a Pan-Africanist. That's what he said. He said Nana Akufo-Addo is a Pan-Africanist. How can a Pan-Africanist go against a Pan-African agenda? And that is why tomorrow this topic is going to be so interesting, because Nana Akufo is not a Pan-Africanist, and we're going to prove that tomorrow, even though we are proving it, but we're going to prove that tomorrow. Nana Akufo-Addo is not a Pan-Africanist. Just because, you talk about Pan-Africanist idea, that does not make you a Pan-Africanist. As long as you are not doing the work of a Pan-Africanist, you are not a Pan-Africanist. I mean, you can come and stand here and talk about the importance of Pan-Africanists, the brilliantness of Pan-Africanists, what should Pan-Africanists do? As long as you are not doing the work, you are not. And Nana Akufo-Addo is not, because he's not doing the work. He only talk about Pan-African. He pretend to be, but he's not. How can he be a Pan-Africanist and you came to America here and sat with Blinken, okay, and put a Pan-Africanist nation like Burkina Faso, Abraham Traore, who is a Pan-Africanist, we can see that as a Pan-Africanist. And you came to America and threw your brother under the bus and asking America to go and fight Now, how they call it, Burkina Faso, asking them for solution, asking them what they should do on the African continent to carry war, and you say these guys are Pan-Africanists. But tomorrow, that's what we're going to be talking about this. And this particular platform, I was so embarrassed, and I heard an African platform, and they were saying such a thing that Nana Akufo-Addo is a Pan-African. How can a Pan-Africanist go against a Pan-Africanist, how they call it, agenda? And so, like I said, tomorrow we're going to be talking about this. So that's why I said we're going to be examining. Okay. So if you read the heading there, it said examining the event that was canceled in Ghana. So we're going to examine it based on the view of some so-called, people who pretend to be Pan-Africanists or who pretend to be fighting for African ideology or African agenda. This is WCC. We don't play around anything.
Facts. I'm glad you dropped the mic like that. Yeah, definitely. You made the point too about what isn't Pan-Africanism, and I think even when we look at fundamentally, like the fundamentals of Pan-Africanism, when from its very inception, whether you're talking about formal or informal, the African people were coming together. They were coming together to end colonialism. They were coming together to end oppression, coming together to end racism, right? They were coming together to end the oppression and exploitation of African people by these Europeans. So if you do anything to contradict that isn't Pan-Africanism. That totally goes against what Pan-Africanism was about from the very beginning. It's an anti-colonial movement, an anti-colonial idea, anti-slavery movement and idea. So, I definitely unite with that. And again, make sure you tap in tomorrow. That's going to be an important discussion. Subscribe to the channel too. We Charge Colonialism, and like and share, please. Natasha, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. I want to go into, and I think we can have more too about about this discussion of Pan-Africanism, what it represents, in Nkrumah's book, which I'll pull up in a second. The link to Revolutionary Path is in the chat. If you're on Facebook or on YouTube, you can click on that link and follow along with this. But Nkrumah, I think, represents a Pan-Africanism that we need to align with, right? Because you have people who claim to be Pan-Africanists, but they're promoting colonial capitalism. The system that has historically oppressed and exploited African people, and I think that's a brand of Pan-Africanism, if you want to call it that, that we should not. Oh, maybe I got it. That's a brand of Pan-Africanism that we should not align ourselves with. Sorry, just sharing the link again. So that's the link, should be the link to the book Revolutionary Path. And we're going to continue where we left off at with chapter 1. I'm going to get right into it. Last week, I think we only had like 15 minutes to get into the book. So let's go. We got about 35 minutes. Go straight into it.
Yeah.
And Malcolm X himself, I've heard Malcolm X in an interview say himself that Black people should adopt the Pan-Africanism of Kwame Nkrumah. I was supposed to play that clip before, man. I'm sorry. I'm not prepared to play it today, but I'll have it next week. So let me get into this. This is so this is the introduction. We're on page 15 for anybody that wants to follow, but I do have it on screen. So I'm gonna go right into it. Colonial existence under imperialist conditions necessitates a fierce and constant struggle for emancipation from the yoke of colonialism and exploitation. The aim of all colonial governments in Africa and elsewhere has been a struggle for raw materials And not only this, but the colonies have become the dumping ground and the colonial peoples the false recipients of manufactured goods of the industrialists and capitalists of Great Britain, France, Belgium, and other colonial powers, who turn to the dependent territories which feed their industrial plants. This is colonialism in a nutshell. The basis of colonial territorial dependence is economic, but the basis of the solution of the problem is political. Hence, political independence is an indispensable step towards securing economic emancipation. This point of view irrevocably calls for an alliance of all colonial territories and dependencies. All provincial and tribal differences should be broken down completely. By operating on tribal differences and colonial provincialisms, the colonial powers' age-long policy of divide and rule has been enhanced, while the colonial national independence movement has been obstructed and bamboozled. The effort of colonial peoples to end colonial exploitation demands the eager and earnest collaboration of all of them. They must bring into its service all their energies, physical, mental, economic, and political. Beneath the humanitarian and appeasement shibboleths of colonial governments, a proper scrutiny leads one to discover nothing but deception, hypocrisy, oppression, and exploitation. Such expressions as colonial charter, trusteeship, partnership, guardianship, international colonial commission, dominion status, condominium, freedom from fear of permanent subjection, constitutional reform, and other shabby sham gestures of setting up a fake machinery for gradual evolution towards self-government are means to cover the eyes of colonial peoples with the veil of imperialist chicanery. But the eyes of colonial peoples are beginning to see the light of day and are awakening to the true meaning of colonial policies. China discovered it. India has discovered it. Burma, Netherlands, East Indies, French Indochina, the Caribbean islands, and Africa are awakening to such a discovery. The idea that Britain, France, or any other colonial power is holding colonies under trusteeship until, in their own opinion, the colonies become capable of self-government is erroneous and misconceived. Colonial powers cannot afford to expropriate themselves. And then to imagine that these colonial powers will hand freedom and independence to their colonies on a silver platter without compulsion is the height of folly. I feel like I want to build on that. Should I keep going?
No, I mean, if you have a point, we can.
Yeah. I don't want to get too far from some of this, so I guess we can build a bit on this. There's a few things, so I don't want to get lost in my own thoughts. But I know that those last couple of paragraphs that I was reading, it took me back to a discussion we was having last week about defining things and using our own language. And I think one point Nkrumah is making here too is of how these terms, what was he saying, like partnership, trusteeship, colonial charter, guardianship, like the connotation that like these had was like some sort of benign or friendly relationship or engagement with the colonized, right? In all actuality, this is hypocrisy, is deception to the oppression and exploitation that's continuing to happen. And so, it's important for us to define our existence and our reality, and to also, to take these terms and to call them for what they really are, right? So, for instance, colonialism at one time, countries were looked at as having some sort of like high status, if they had colonies. And that's not the way I want to explain it, but to have a colony was a good thing at one time, right? But if someone was to come out and say that a country was their possession or a colony today, the whole world would turn against them, right? And there would be resistance to that. So they would say Commonwealth, or they will call these places provinces, right? Or even someone who is colonized, they will call them a citizen of the empire, or the country, right? So we have to be able to call those things out for what they really are, because it really confuses people, right? When someone says this is a democracy, it confuses people and really think that they have the same rights and freedoms as other people, when the reality is, the oppression and exploitation of African people is still happening, right? But it has happened, but now your participation is legitimizing that oppression and exploitation. The last thing, I want to say, because there's some other things that Nkrumah is getting at here, but I think it's important for us to, see the world through our own lens. We have been trained to see the world through the lens of the colonizer, and so now there's a struggle. Most people are struggling to become the colonizer, to become the imperialist, because what they have done, the colonizers, they have gained everything that they have gained through force, through genocide, through theft. And now they're at the point where they control markets, they control industries. And so they kind of, what they have done, they have said that, okay, you all have opportunities to climb up the social ladder and be one with us. So now we struggle for crumbs, and we, will turn on our own brothers and sisters to climb the social ladder within the system of oppression and exploitation within the colony, so that we can reach that level of the colonizer, instead of saying, you know what, we need to come together and dismantle this system that they have designed for their own benefit. We can't struggle and say, hey, we want equal rights, we want to be equal with you, under this idea that they have created. America itself is an idea created by white people, by Europeans. Africans did not create the idea of America. And all of a sudden, they said, you know what, you can be a part of our system. As a matter of fact, you can become American. You can be American. And people, and so I just have, and going back to Sekou, Sekou understood that. That's why he became a liberation fighter and said, no, I want to overturn the system. So I know I kind of overspoke this, but I wanted to drill home that point. But did y'all want to add anything to this? I think Nkrumah said some other things.
I think in terms of, what you were talking about, and thinking about what he said on at the end of page 15, when he talks about the provincial and tribal differences should be broken down completely, and thinking about what you were saying about the participation of African countries in legitimizing the West, and this kind of like trusteeship that still continues today between African countries and their former colonial oppressors, I think is an important part to link together for me, in terms of thinking about, like, one of the stories I was looking at doing was around migration. And I think that there's so much, like, for example, we could see around the world in terms of migration of African people. People talk about migration here in the US, that's like a very popular conversation around migrants and, people coming here from, South America, from, from Haiti, from, Sudan and other countries in Africa. And then the migration that we don't talk about a lot, especially here in the US, or think about a lot, is, in terms of migration from within the African continent, any of these particular countries that you mentioned in terms of when you were talking, and them migrating over into Europe. And so the deadliness of, or like the danger, the deadliness, or the dangerousness of migration, that how many hundreds of thousands of people, of our people, of African people die, migrating to these countries.
Millions.
Yeah, that are still looked at as, and still operate as in this, and what he was calling this trusteeship, right? Where, their legitimation by African countries and their legitimation by, African people, and those who support capitalism and continued partnership in these ways with Europeans, add to this continuous flow, right, of this migration that takes the lives of a lot of our people, and leads to a lot of, like, the trafficking and that still goes on within, like, those northern Arab countries, and all of that, just by not taking a real Pan-African stance in terms of who these neo-colonial countries are and what they do, aids in this process of our continual displacement, and even thinking about countries within themselves, and the going back to that thing. And then I think I'm gonna stop there, because just going back to like the need for provincial and tribal differences to be broken down, and how if African countries legitimize more, and look more, and work toward a legitimation of their own alliances within the country and Africa's own sovereignty, and as opposed to the participation and legitimation of these Western European countries and their neo-colonial capitalist policies, then it would look different in terms of, okay, where are you focusing your energy? Are you focusing your energy on policies that support the West but are detrimental to your people, and therefore contribute in this necessity for migration, and therefore put their lives in danger? Or are you going to instead do and enact policies that help your people maintain a good standard of living where they are, and they don't have to look at Europe or America as the only, like, as the best option? These same people who, when you get to their countries, will kill you, will miseducate you, will commit racist acts against you, will discriminate against you. These same countries, right, that when you get to these places, that is how it's like you have no reprieve. Like, you're struggling in your country, but you're going to go to the oppressor country for them to even oppress you when you're there. So it makes it it puts African people in that, like, never ending situation of being at the mercy of these countries.
No, absolutely. And like this, right? Well, Frank, did you want to add something?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Okay.
just to add to what you both say, especially you said something that we Africans have to look at the war according to African perspective. All right, according to African struggle, according to African narrative. We cannot look at the African perspective in replacement with the European perspective, because the Western perspective is in line of what they believe in, and what they believe in is not what we believe in, and what we believe in is not what they believe in. All right, for a typical example, now I have the opportunity to bring it out because that was a story that I wanted to talk about. South Africa took Asia to the International Criminal Court, or the International Criminal Justice System, against the issue or the atrocity, right, or the inhumane or the genocide committed in both Palestine and Gaza by Israel with the support of the United States when it comes to financial assistance or how they call it, ammo or machinery assistance to Israel to commit genocide against those people. Now, the argument of Israel lawyer, okay, that with also the United States lawyer, right? Their argument here is Israel is not committing genocide against those people. Rather, Israel is fighting for her right. Israel is not committing genocide for those, against those people. Rather, Israel is fighting Hamas. All right. And then it said Israel did not bomb any refugee camp or any hospital, okay, occupied by women and children, innocent people. All right. When videos, evidence are there proving that Israel bombed those places occupied by women and children, hospital where people went to go seek treatment, refugee camp where people went to go seek how to call it, freedom, all right, to find a place where they can see as a free zone, all right, until things can calm down. Now, those places were not occupied by Hamas. So if you are supporting Israel against the allegation and you say you are there fighting Hamas, you are not bombing or dropping bomb to places that are occupied by Hamas. Rather, Hamas is even fighting for the Palestinian, for the people of Gaza against Israel. So Hamas is fighting Israel to protect life. So how then can you come and say you are, in fact, in the first court hearing, or how they call it, hearing, their claim is, in fact, the court should go against South Africa. The court should charge South Africa for claiming that Israel is committing genocide against Hamas or Palestine. And the United States firmly supports Israel's stand. Yeah, in fact, the United States is saying they are going to continue to support Israel to fight Hamas. And we talked about this before. Okay, we said the United States is using Hamas because that's what they're going to use in a court. If you go to previous podcasts that we have done, okay? And that's why exactly the date. They use Hamas. They are not using, what they are doing in those places, but they are using the story of Hamas, that Hamas is a terrorist group. They are there to fight the terrorist group. They are there to eradicate terrorists. That's their claim, which of course we said it before, that's what they're going to use, and that's what they use in the court. But again, the supporter of South Africa, those lawyers, okay, they have great point, they have valid point, all right, and they prove everything that this is not against Hamas, but rather you are killing innocent people. Because first of all, the issue that happened in October 7 is 2023. It was 2023, right? But Israel been bumping and how they call it, killing Palestinian and the people of Gaza before October 7, 2023. Israel been committing genocide since in the 1800s, okay, up to the 1900s. Israel been killing these people. So how then can you come and say you are fighting Hamas? Hamas was founded around the 1940s or in the 1900s. But Israel been committing genocide against these people in the 1800s. And Hamas was founded in
I think Hamas came in like 1980s, man.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how can you say you are fighting Hamas?
Yeah, they was
okay. When you been killing these people since in the 1800s. So you see a contradiction that Even with that, they could not prove themselves. All right. So again, that's why again we Africans we have to view. And let me just give another point. Right now, you talk about immigration, right? How people are traveling, coming to the United States, and how the United States, are being so harsh on them, right? Again, let's look at this. These people look out the war in their own view, okay, and based on what they think it is, how they call it, interest them, they work towards it. Now, where in the war can we find the Ukrainian refugee camp? I don't think so. I don't think there is any area called refugee camp where they are hosting the Ukrainian. When the issue happened in Ukraine, the United States, along with UK, along with Australia, they were able in no time to host the Ukrainian. No refugee. In fact, the Ukrainian came in exactly as they were coming in, having social security numbers strictly. And at the same time, they gave them status, okay, working permit to work quickly. Because they see each other as Westerner, as European. Whereas other people, they don't bring it in. They close border. They chase you with their immigration army. They chase you with their military that they have. In fact, they work with the Mexican, right? For example, okay, they pay the Mexican to protect the borders from people coming in. I mean, so these things, we have to look at the war based on our struggle, okay, not Western narrative. It has to be based on our narrative, what we think it is in our interest.
No, absolutely. And I think like if anything to take away is like, yo, we have to see the world through our own experiences, and the experience we have to go back and look at the world through the experiences of our ancestors before colonialism, right, before imperialism, so that we can be able to design a world that's more conducive to our own existence. Because even if we see there's levels of consciousness, I think, and lenses that we can look through. We have to be able to see it through the colonizer lens, but in a sense where we understand how they view us and how they're going to behave towards African people, but being able to see the world through our own existence before colonialism, and also as a colonized people, so we can understand what needs to be done to overturn the system, but not always seeing the world where we're constantly having to struggle to dismantle something, but seeing the world where freely, as a free African people, that's able to design the world, right? Design the world and build the world an alternative to the current system. Because if we are constantly looking at ourselves as an oppressed and exploited people, then we're only going to be focusing on fighting and not really building. And I think like that's a serious contradiction that we deal with as well. So we have to see ourselves as we have a right to be liberated and see the world as a liberated people and build the world that we want, while we're constantly struggling. But let me read just like this last part. Let us take, for example, Britain in an attempt to reconcile the inherent contradictions within her capitalist economy. She has two courses only left to keep her home population from starvation. Either her population must be dispersed in the colonial territories, or she must guarantee subsistence to them by exploitation of the colonies. This is, man, can I read that one more time? Because that's a serious point right there. Let us take, for example, Britain, an attempt to reconcile the inherent contradictions within her capitalist economy. She has two courses only left to keep her home population from starvation, right? And this is across the board with Europeans, but we're talking about Britain. Or she must guarantee subsistence to them by exploitation of the colonies. The former, if put into action, will ultimately necessitate agitation for dominion status or no less than independence by the white settlers, as was the case in colonial America or in the Union of South Africa. Right? Such a step may also lead to race conflict between the settlers and the Aborigines, as is now in the case in the Union of South Africa. The latter is natural, since Britain or any other colonial power depends on the exports of her manufactured goods and the cheap imports of raw materials. The colonies are thus a source of raw materials and cheap labor, and a dumping ground for spurious surplus goods to be sold at exorbitant prices. Therefore, these colonies become avenues for capital investment, not for the benefit and development of the colonial peoples, but for the benefit of the investors, whose agents are the government's concern. That is why it is coherent nonsense to say that Britain or any other colonial power has the good intention of developing her colonies for self-government and independence. The only thing left for the colonial peoples to do is to obtain their freedom and independence from their colonial powers. Whatever camouflage colonial governments may decide upon, be it in the form of appeasements cloaked in the constitutional reforms or the Pan-Africanism of Jane Smuts, Frank, you was talking about this type of Pan-Africanism. There's only one road, the road of the national liberation movement to colonial independence. It cannot come through delegations, gifts, charity, paternalism, grants, concessions, proclamations, charters, or reformism, but only through the complete change of the colonial system, a united effort to unscramble the whole colonial egg of the last 100 years, a complete break of the colonial dependencies from their mother countries and the establishment of their complete independence. Yo, I think, man, when we come, I kind of want to come back next week and pick up where we left off. We might have to move to the next chapter, but you guys can read ahead. But there's so much that was said right here, and I don't even know where to begin. Real quick, let me just go back. I'll open it up to you guys, but I do want to go back to this. How he starts off by saying colonial existence under imperialist conditions necessitates a fierce and constant struggle for emancipation from the yoke of colonialism and exploitation. The aim of all colonial governments in Africa and elsewhere has been a struggle for raw materials, and so forth. But the point, point or thought that I had reading all of this, again, just going back to what we need to do and how we have to think, because the colonial, the colony, the design of the colony has not changed. It has not changed. It's still a system of oppression and exploitation. And when we participate without a strategy, and I'm not telling people to not go, because I have, I work, right? But whether you work in the system or you have your own business in the system, it's still a part of the system. All of it is still a part of the system. If we're not sovereign, if they control the economy, you're still participating and advancing white power. You're still advancing, whether you have your own business and so forth. So we have to have the mindset, whatever we're doing, our strategy is to dismantle the system. Whatever resources we gather, how do we use these resources to create our own system and dismantle the system of oppression and exploitation, right? Because what happens is, when we're working for Target, Walmart, we're working for the government, all you're doing, these are institutions that they control. All we're doing is going into these institutions and helping them build power, right, and maintain their power over African people, right? And when you have the mindset of I'm going to work for Walmart and become a manager of this system, I'm work for this institution, become CEO, right? These are institutions, the system that they have put in place to maintain their power over African people. And when Africans have the mindset of I want to be a part of this, I want to climb up the social ladder and be a colonizer, then all you're doing is perpetuating this relationship. So I wanted to say that, and I hope that makes sense, man. Because I'm kind of articulating this on the fly. But I'll open it up. There's a lot that was said here, but I want to give y'all some space to say something.
You want to go, Frank, or you want me?
No, go ahead. Then I can go after you.
Man, don't let me go again.
No, you know, we were just giving each other the leeway. I think that going back to the, you know, page 16, where he talks about and the attempt to reconcile the inherent contradictions within her capitalist economy. She has 2 courses only left to keep her home population from starvation. Either her population must be dispersed in the colonial territories, or she must guarantee subsistence to them by the exploitation of the colonies. And I think that, you know, going back to what you were talking about in terms of, you know, people thinking that these countries have, you know, your best interests at heart, but people not realizing, because, you know, we've talked about it many times, and we're not going to stop talking about it, because as long as we're in a neo-colonial position, then it's going to be an issue, the issue of miseducation, and the issue of not even getting, you know, or, you know, giving an education within the countries today about what is truly happening in the world. Because if you don't even know the history of colonialism, right, and what happened under colonialism, then you have nothing really to compare what is happening today to, in a sense. Like when you learn about colonialism, like, you know, here in the US, you know, within school, you know, people learn about colonialism, and they learn about it obviously in a in a pro-colonist way, like, you know, in a pro-settler colonial mindset. They're given that gaze, they're given that idea to look at the world through. And then, you know, especially if, you know, if you're learning a little bit of that in school, and then when you're done with school, who's really talking about colonization in the mainstream media or outlets or anything like that? It's just talk of, as if things are, you know, as if we're beyond colonialism, as if things are just operating, and we just need to fix a couple things here and there, not that we're in a continued colonial state. And so I think people still have this idea, right? They still have the idea that, you know, these countries, you know, we just have to work with them in a way that, you know, we can both get what we need. But the thing about it is, colonialism, the colonized and the colonizer are not on equal playing ground. They're not on equal levels of power. You know, you're not making decisions together for the betterment of both parties. That's not what's happening. You are, as you know, he said here, you know, as a colonial territory, as a colonized people, you're just there. One, your land is there for colonial countries to send their people, for them to have a better life, or to get, like, you know, even when you think about what's happening with the Chinese, when you think about, and you see them going to live in Africa, the Chinese are sending, you know, when they build when they're, you know, having these contracts made up with these African countries or Caribbean countries, the Chinese are going and they're living in these places, right? They're looking for places to, again, support their own people because of their capitalist ways. That's how you hide the fact that capitalism is destructive. It doesn't work, by making it seem like it does. You know, you're shuffling people, you know, people from Russia, people from Europe are, you know, going into Africa, owning a lot of the businesses, a lot of the trade. These are all things that are being done so that these outside populations from these colonial countries are able to provide something for their people. It's not about providing something for you. And I think that, you know, when you don't know the history of colonialism in the way that Nkrumah's talking about, in the way that, you know, we know it, and because we're reading and we're thinking through these things, and looking at these perspectives, then you don't see what's happening today as a continuation of colonialism, right? You don't see that all they're continuing to do is make sure that, you know, they can exploit these, you know, countries so that they can take care of their population, or that they have the opportunity to send their people to wherever. Like European, that's why you think about this last point. That's why you see these like European passports or American passports, Western passports having an almost open policy anywhere. It's harder for people who are not from these countries to go to another country and get citizenship. But you know, Americans, you know, Europeans, it's so much easier, you know, to go some other place with your passport and gain access and be able to, you know, do things in other countries, and mostly, you know, these countries where you know, you're having this easy access. You know, there are a lot of, you know, former colonial countries, or that you just have the free range to go live and make your life, quote unquote, what you want it, because of this continued like that's just a real example. Like the fact that, you know, these are the prized passports and these are the passports for almost global entry anywhere, is that example of what Nkrumah was talking about.
Yeah, just to add to that, right? When it comes to the capitalist economy, as you read in that paragraph, again, we already said this, right? I'm just going to repeat myself. A system created by the West is not a system that any black nation should use or should work with. Capitalism was as a result of slavery. Capitalism was as a result of colonization. Capitalism was as a result of looting African resources. Capitalism was as a result of racism. Capitalism was as the result of oppression. We can name everything. We can name it and keep going, right? So, have that been said, now look at this. The same European who have created a system, okay, based on oppression, based on taking advantage of people over the years to empower themselves. So when you look at capital, there's no one in this world want to lose access to capital. You always want to maintain that status. So if Europeans use a system, okay, to oppress people, to take advantage of people, to loot people resources, right, to take human being as commodity, if they use that system, do you think they want to lose that system? They don't want to lose it. And that's why they call it list, capitalist. So if you are a capitalist, you are a thief. You are a looter. You are an oppressor, right? So you take advantage of people. So when you are a capitalist, it means you never fight for equality. There will always be inequality. Capitalists came as a result of inequality. And whenever there is inequality, there will always be someone taking advantage of. And that's what happened to African people, because there was inequality, right? Now, again, let's say this. In America here, for example, I'm going to use this and then go to the African continent. They always talk about equality, right? In a capitalist economy, there will now be equality. And that is why they always use that phrase, capitalism is a form of where people compete, okay, with one another. People compete with goods and services. Whereas in America here, they have never created a system where people compete equally. Go in a black community, look at the schools, underfunded. But go to other places, it's not underfunded. Is that capitalist? Is that where people compete equally? No. Go to black community, all right, where you see hospital, underfunded. All right? That's capitalism. You have to subjugate certain people in order to have capitalism, in order to have a capitalist economy. In a capitalist economy, no one can be equal. There is no equality. In an economy where you have equality, is not capitalist. In an economy where you have people right, is not capitalist economy. In an economy, okay, where people strive equally, that is not capitalist economy. That is socialist economy. That is scientific socialism. But we have been lied to over the years, okay? The people keep lying to us that scientific socialism is not right, but capitalist, how they call it, economy is the right thing. Meanwhile, we have been lied to. Meanwhile, in a capitalist economy, there is no equality. You have to subjugate certain people. You have to oppress certain people. All right. You have to put certain people in certain community, in certain neighborhood. You have to deny certain people. But in a socialist economy, you cannot deny anybody. Everybody are equal. Okay. And that is what they do here. Now let's go to the African, how they call it, continent. These same people who said capitalist economy is the best. All right. Now, if it is the best, who control the mines in Africa, the dam, the resources in Africa? They are the one controlling it. And because it is a capitalist form of economy, that is why Africans people are being oppressed. That is why there's in Africa, like for example, in DRC Congo, if it is capitalist economy that can make people, that can drive people forward, that can make people to compete, why in DRC Congo people are fighting just to live in the first place, just to live? Why in DRC Congo war are there, proxy war, people supporting rebels? That is a form of capitalist economy, because you have to oppress certain people in order to build your economies in your country. So capitalist economy means oppression. There's no equality. There is inequality. All right? In this form of modern time, look at Africa. Technology is not even there. We have the resources, but the capitalists, the thief, they are saying you cannot process your raw material in Africa. In order to have a capitalist economy, you cannot process the raw material there. It has to come to the capitalist, the thief, okay, to process it, and then they give you some. That is not capital. That is not how they call it, equality. That is a form of oppression, and that is why we Africans, right, have to look at the war in our own perspective. What is good for us? We have to define the war based on what is good for us.
Nah, appreciate that, man. I say my browser has been blocked.
Can I add on something to what?
Yeah, go ahead.
His last point about defining the war based on what's good for us, and I was thinking back to what I was talking about before, and something else I wanted to say in terms of this connects back to like the miseducation in terms of we have to see that we are separate from, and that we are not part of the global capitalist system. Like, I think we see ourselves as being part of this, and strive to be, because, like Frank was saying, capitalism is, put up on this pedestal of the right one, and, socialism is wrong and all this other stuff. And I think that because we've been trained to buy into that, we see ourselves as part of the capitalist system, and that we just have to strive to be more capitalistic to get to our liberation, or to get to a better place. Like, we just have to follow these steps, the same steps that Europeans have followed, in order for us to get there. And I think that's one of the things that holds us back, is recognizing that we are not part of we're not part of the capitalist system. Like, for like a metaphor, it's like we think we're here at the table eating dinner with as part of the capitalist system. We don't realize we are the dinner, as part of we are the dinner in the capitalist system, so that we can't operate from the stance that we're the ones eating the food. We have to realize that we are the food that is being eaten to sustain everybody else. And so therefore, once we recognize that, we can move differently. But I think, because of the miseducation and because we're being trained to look at everything from a European perspective and think that a European perspective is neutral, as universal, then we don't think that we need to do something else. And we think that eventually, if we just do the same thing, we will have, the same thing, but we won't.
Yeah, but in the sense, not completely, but relative to the masses of African people, there's like this opportunity though for you to become the colonized. You can never be them because you're not European, right? You won't be in the inner circle, but you can kind of be among them. And just to use Oprah Winfrey and Jay-Z, like these guys as examples, and these people who have the resources where they're so far removed from the masses of African people, they can't live among us. They don't think like us, and they kind of look down on us, just like the European, just like the colonizer, right? And they think that you have to do what they've done, right? And the problem is you. They dehumanize you just like the colonizer. And that's what this system does. Like African people will come from the bottom, and they will do anything, to get to the top, to be a part of the colonized, turn on their own brother, and sister, right? Steal from them, exploit them. That's why I say, if you have a business in this system, what is the business work? The business work is trying to make as much money as he or she can, right? So they're going to do their very best to try to pay as less as they can to their workers, right? And get as much profit as they can. They're going to try to cut corners, do whatever they have to do to make as much money as they have. And it's this greed that they have, so that they can gain as much money or wealth, so that they can live where the colonizers live. So they can sort of like live among them, but they'll never be, European. You're still African, because there's that element of racism, right? But they're so detached from the masses of African people. But what happens is the masses of African people, when we adopt this mindset of, if everybody's thinking that, hey, I can be Jay-Z, right? We get away from what we're supposed to actually be doing, which is dismantling the system that is dehumanizing us, that's oppressing us, and that is killing us, right? The system is destroying us. And just the point of the dehumanization part, again, like colonialism has created these conditions for African people. And what happens is you have people, again, participating in this system, running for office. One of the stories I want to talk about was the new mayor of Philadelphia who wants to hire more police, and do what, right? Wants to bring crime down, wants to lock more African people up, right? Who are victims of colonialism. But it's this dehumanization process where they look at the drug addict, they look at the drug seller, right? They look at these people, they don't look at the context of the context as far as what African people have to go through to survive, right? The broken homes, as a result of colonialism. The father or mother who was incarcerated or who died, from overdose or gun violence. All of these, symptoms of colonialism, all these results of colonialism. Instead of looking at the system as creating these conditions and perpetuating it, they dehumanize them and want to become mayor, want to become police chief, right? Want to become a police officer, everything to uphold the system. Last point I want to make, because I actually was going to say something else, but you had said something made me think about that. Just as this last point I want to make, Nkrumah was talking about, and I want us to look at this in the sense of, because he's talking about colonialism in Africa, but this applies to domestic colonialism as well, because African people in the United States are a colonized people. And I think you had said some things too, Frank, that made me think about this. But when you go back after the Civil War, a little history after the Civil War, African people was emancipated. And Natasha, I know you had some thoughts about that word emancipated, right? But African people were emancipated. And what happened, because it's something that Nkrumah is sort of alluding to here, when he's talking about Africa, the same thing happened with the domestic colony. The Europeans, the Southern Europeans, they had to create a system of domestic colonialism so that the Europeans, and I'm talking about Euro-Americans, right, in the South, did not have to compete with the emancipated Africans in this economy, right? And so a domestic colony was created even after slavery ended. A new form of slavery was put in place so that the African could not participate, and America could not participate in the system the same way as the European, right? And so they were able to advance at the expense of African people in this country. And so, you know, that's the history. I don't really have enough time to like really go into this. But when he says what he says here, I want us to think of in terms of think about gentrification and ethnic cleansing as well. When he's here, he's talking about an attempt to reconcile the inherent contradictions within her capitalistic economy. She has two courses only left to keep her home population from starvation. Either her population must disperse in the colonial territories, or she must guarantee subsistence to them by exploitation of the colonies. And he says some other things, but you know, I want us to think about ethnic cleansing and gentrification, what they call gentrification. When the European is coming into the Euro, I call them all Europeans. When white people come into Black communities, right, and set up businesses and move into these communities, right, they're coming into the colony, the domestic colony here in America, right, and they do it in Africa and other places, Jamaica, wherever, right. They come into these places to exploit the African. What happens too, they also dump their goods. He talks about dumping that takes place in Africa over here. And in the domestic colony here in America, that happens, right? Where they dump products in our community and we're overpriced. You know, like since I was young and growing up, we always knew if you go out into the suburbs, things are cheaper. In the suburbs, things is cheaper when you go into the white communities, right? But if you buy the same product in the Black community and impoverished communities, you're paying more than what they're paying out in the white community. So they have the resources and they're paying less price for the same products. So they dump these products into our communities and we're paying more. This is colonialism. This is what colonialism is. But you know, that's the last point I want to make. I'll give y'all the final thoughts before we close out.
So yeah, I wanted to touch on, you know, emancipation quickly in terms of that, and then a little bit on the disbursement and thinking about it here in the, you know, as Black people in the US being a colonized people. I think that, you know, this idea of, you know, emancipation where I think that there's this particular understanding of what emancipation is versus what legally Europeans know it to, you know it as or see it as, and the etymology of the words that we use. We take words for face value as what we see them as, but their lineage and the etymology and the meaning, original meaning behind the words are still used and looked at through the legal system in terms of how they operate based on the laws that they create, you know, especially thinking about the US, but also thinking about, you know, the West in general, you know, and how they've created language around laws and what's legal and what's not and all this other stuff. And so I think that's one of the things that we also lack in terms of being able to understand what is happening and why things happen subsequently is, you know, our understanding or our shallow understanding of what these words that they're using mean. So therefore, if you understand emancipation as, you know, just the that you're, you know, for the kind of like etymological basis of the word and like the root of this word, just meaning that, you know, being freed from a master. Now through, you know, European eyes, okay, maybe you're not the master of, you know, maybe that particular white person who used to own your family is no longer the master, but the state is now the master. That's why you would have within the Constitution that, you know, the 14th Amendment that, oh, okay, well, you can no longer be enslaved unless you are imprisoned. And so therefore, now you can be imprisoned, you know, property of the state, and still be enslaved, even though you quote unquote were emancipated, right? Because you're not free, you are emancipated, right? You're no longer a slave to a particular person, but you're still enslaved to the state. And so like the legal, you know, like the words, how Europeans love to play with words and change them up and then use them, and we're thinking they're talking about one way and doing something, and actually they're not. And then we question why things still look the way that they do. Well, because technically, do we understand what they were saying when they're talking about, you know, emancipation? They're not saying we want you to be free. They're saying, okay, well, you don't have to necessarily be, you know, under enslavement to a particular white person, but you will still be enslaved by the state. You know, you will still be under colonial control, you know, in that sense. And so therefore thinking about if you can understand things that way, then yeah, then you can see what happens to African people within America, you know, in particular when we talk about ethnic cleansing and gentrification, but it's happening in South Africa. When I went to South Africa, you know, a couple years ago, white folks are moving into Soweto. Like, you know, they're talking, you know, they move and disperse wherever they want. It's like, you know, the places that they create for you, whether they're reservations here in the US or reservations you know, within Africa, you know, what they would call by a different name, is still the same thing, right? Taking you and huddling you into a particular little area because they want to use all your land. But then when they decide, they will also go into that place where they, so, you know, where they didn't want, or where they felt, you know, where the unwanteds go. And so understanding it as that, but, you know, only able to explain it, or, you know, not only, but like being able to really recognize it more when you understand the language that they're using. Because we think we understand the language that they're using, but we really don't, because they're not even teaching you what they're really talking about.
Yeah. Hey, well, go ahead, Frank.
Go ahead.
No, just a quick one. Yeah, and it's all, if I create a word, I may have a meaning for it. I can, you know, but I'll have one meaning for it and have another meaning, you know, for you to have for that same word. That makes sense, right? You know, this is what this word means, but in all actuality, like the use of the word, though, this is what I want the word, how I want the word to be utilized, or the instrumental use of the word, right? It's for this purpose. When I created, you know, these terms, even with you talk about legality, laws and things, this is how I want these laws to be applied, you know. And you may think it means one thing, but at the end of the day, guess who's interpreting it, right? It's people who are interpreting it, people with a certain view and perspective. And because you are not an authority, or you not an expert in what do they call legalese, so, you know, like, who are you? You don't know. Like, where's your degree at? Right. So that sort of thing. But did you have any last words, Frank, before we?
And my last word will be, the oppressor can never free the oppressed. Only the oppressed can feel, can free the oppressed.
Nah, I appreciate that. Appreciate everybody for tapping in. And I guess, like, my last thought too, I wanted to say this before, but capitalism isn't a law of nature. And they want us to believe that it is a law of nature, right? That's how they feed capitalism to us, as if it's a law of nature. So, you know, we need to design and create something, and I don't care what we call it, you know, but it needs to be humane, right? But with that being said, we'll be back at our regular time next week at 10 a.m. Appreciate everybody for tapping in to these important conversations. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. We Charge Colonialism. Make sure you like, make sure you share. We definitely going to continue to build the channel, build this institution, and hopefully get more people involved in what we want to create as we try to counterbalance colonial media and the false narratives and false stories that are being put out there as it pertains to our experience and our existence. We are revolutionaries, and we want to be liberated from the system of colonialism. So again, appreciate you all for tapping in. Make sure you tap in tomorrow, 1:00. Frank will be on, and I'll actually be on tomorrow, going through a blueprint for Black Power at 9 p.m. Eastern time. I was under the weather early in the week, so I didn't have an opportunity to do it, but I'll be on tomorrow to discuss that text. So until next time, be revolutionary. And again, rest in power to Baba Sekou Odinga, freedom fighter, to the very end, at least in this, level of existence. So he has transitioned, but he is still with us for sure. Black Power, man.
Free them all. Free all political prisoners.